Oh, there we go. There we go. It's good now. So let me pause this thing so it doesn't show me the video of us on YouTube. Pause. Okay.
Don't forget to go to the garden tomorrow.
I will not forget. I actually printed my ticket just because I have a printer.
Why would you print your ticket out?
Because I have a printer. So.
What year is this?
Also, I don't have the passbook doesn't exist, so.
It's a shame. Let me add my ticket to my passbook right now.
File, new, multi-track session.
Passbook skills.
2016, 1031. GeekNights show template.
I used Apple Pay today, too. Oh, man, it's such a good day. Because Dwayne Reed lets you use Apple Pay, and the candy's going to be on sale tomorrow.
All right. Someone pointed out that there are numerous pictures of candy corn being on sale already.
That's why I went today. I was looking for it.
It's bad news, that stuff.
I love me some candy corn.
All right. It's Monday, October 31st, 2016. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights tonight on literally the 11th anniversary of the launch of Geek Nights. We're talking about the great DDOS that lasted about a day and Rim missed because I was in Australia.
It didn't even last a day.
Yeah. Up. 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 Okay. Hey, up. Up. And everything's saved. So yeah, we've been doing this for 11 years, pretty much nonstop. It's kind of weird.
An arbitrary number? I mean, was it weird the last episode we did? This episode's only a few days newer than that one.
No, that wasn't weird, but this is weird.
This
and
one
the 10th
is
anniversary
because
was also weird.
Because an arbitrary number has passed, suddenly weirdness enters.
Have you ever celebrated a birthday?
What
ever?
if we use the hexadecimal system instead of the decimal system?
But we don't.
Would it have been weird when we did show FFF as opposed to...
You know why it's weird? Because when we started Geek Nights in 2005, a bunch of other people also started podcasts.
What if we were
on most of those people are no longer podcasting.
What if we were on a different planet that orbited the sun faster or slower, right? Just because the Earth went around the sun almost exactly X number of times, right? You know, it's like...
Even then, it still would have been weird because pretty much everyone we knew who started a podcast in those early days of podcasting
If Geek Nights was on Mars, this would be like our, I don't know, Mars goes around the sun a lot slower and farther, so...
Have you ever celebrated a birthday? Ever?
Only when I was small. Only because I got presents.
So now you don't celebrate birthdays anymore?
Not really.
No, not at all?
No.
What about other people's birthdays?
I really don't respect birthdays very much.
All right. You ever celebrate what about MagFest? That's every year. You celebrate that once a year.
It's not just some arbitrary number.
It's just an arbitrary day. Just arbitrary atoms go to an arbitrary place to move arbitrary wooden cubes around.
No, not at all.
How is it not arbitrary? The universe is there. They're arbitrary or meaningless.
Because on a birthday, you're basically having a party, and the only reason you're having the party is because some arbitrary thing happened. MagFest is like, oh,
yeah, that arbitrary thing being I was born.
You're not having it. You're not making like a reason to party. You're literally just saying, fuck it, it's party time, and everybody parties.
Well, what is a party but just a miserable arrangement of atoms in an arbitrary configuration caused by the causal chain stretching forth from the Big Bang?
Sure.
Anyway, it's the 11th anniversary of Geek Nights, and what's funny about this is that if you're a patron of our Patreon, where I've been uploading the hitherto unreleased beta episodes of Geek Nights.
If you're a dumb person.
So the one I just uploaded was actually
who is very loose with your monies.
Was actually pretty funny. There's a commentary in the upload of the episode, but the episode was actually pretty good, which was weird because most of those things were terrible.
Wasn't it like episode 4 or something?
Yeah. It was also the last time we used the Logitech stick mic ever.
Okay.
At the very, very end of the show.
So then we went to buy Radio Shack mics?
We plugged the Radio Shack mic directly into my line in and yelled into it, and I yelled Jack Thompson, and then there's a long pause, and then you said one word. Can you guess what that word was?
Fear?
Penis.
Oh, okay.
But the funny thing is that the microphone actually sounded way worse at first. It took us a while still. Those microphones were the worst. But the other really funny thing in that episode was that I started talking about how the Red Wings are having a really good season. It was around this time, so pretty early in the season.
I don't think they won the Stanley Cup.
So this was the
in this
year
time frame.
after the lockout and some rules changes. So
Yeah.
so I was making this argument that the old offensive teams are back. The trap is dead. Like, you're going to see the Red Wings. This is going to be a good year for us. You're like, you give me this whole long thing about how this is bullshit and I'm being overly optimistic. And sure enough, the Red Wings won the President's Trophy that year. So it was I was right.
They didn't win the whole thing.
No, they lost the Stanley Cup. Do you remember who won the Stanley Cup then?
11 years ago?
Yeah.
What year was this? 2005?
2005, 2006. So, because there was no 2005 Stanley Cup because the lockout.
2006. So it was the lockout year, and then the next year.
It's the next year, and there were some rules changes, as I recall, as well.
Wait. So the Red Wings didn't win.
The Red Wings did not
So
win.
it wasn't a team in the West.
Scott, it's the President's Trophy. If you win the President's Trophy, you're like not going to win the Cup guarantee.
No, I'm saying it had to be a team in the East because it
Yep.
wasn't the Red Wings who were in the West.
Yep. It was.
2000.
I think it was the Hurricanes, actually.
It sounds all right. They were good at one point, I remember. There was definitely a time where they won and were good for a short period before they got sucky again and stayed sucky.
Oh, I typed 2006 Hurricanes. It's telling me only about actual Hurricanes and not the hockey team.
Well, then maybe it's not the right one if that's not what showed up.
NHL. Stanley Cup Finals. Stanley Cup Finals location. Game 4. Rosters Hurricanes. So Hurricanes won the Stanley Cup in 2006. But if you Google for 2006 Hurricanes, you do not get this. You get real Hurricanes.
The Carolina Hurricanes used to be the Hartford Whalers.
Oh, yeah?
That's what they were.
You know who they were
earlier.
playing against in the final? The Edmonton Oilers. Yeah.
I mean, there are only a few NHL teams that were never good, like Arizona.
The Blues.
The Blues were good.
They're okay
what are you
now,
talking
actually.
about?
You're
The
gonna see them
Blues,
tomorrow.
the Blues have been good.
Yes, that is true.
Recently and also long ago.
Who has never been good?
Arizona.
Have the Sabres, but they're pretty young. Have the Sabres ever been good?
Yes.
When?
There was a time where they were good.
Best Buffalo Sabres season ever. Let's see. List of Buffalo Sabres seasons.
Yeah, I was going to say, you should just look up the list, Wikipedia.
I'll look this up later. Lost. Oh, it looks like they made it to the playoffs a few times. All right. Anyway, so yeah, if you're a patron, you'll get to listen to that beta episode, which has hitherto never been released. And the other weird thing about it is Scott talks a lot about politics and Karl Rove and how excited he is about Obama and how he's listening to Obama's podcast. It's a different time.
I don't remember ever listening to Obama's podcast.
Not only did you listen to Obama's podcast, but you constantly bothered me because I didn't listen to it yet. You were
Well,
like,
maybe that'll teach you. Everyone should listen to Obama's podcast, and you'll realize there's no point.
I hope Obama starts a podcast up again after he's out of the presidency.
I hope anyone who has ever been a political leader in the world in significant power or wealth makes a podcast. Because notice, right, that in terms of like voices you hear in the public, it's usually not the powerful, intelligent people on Earth do not communicate with the general public openly or often.
Well, it's kind of like how we were
the
talking about
the only ones who do that are typically like assholes and evil people.
There was a conversation in the forum where we were like, yeah, you got to go to Reddit for like your specialized community stuff. And people were saying that, there's like, it came about that forums about things out there in the world that aren't on Reddit tend to be super provincial and have bad knowledge because anyone who actually has for reals professional or semi-professional skill in pretty much anything tends to just do that thing professionally.
That's mostly true. However, for certain things on Earth, there are certain forums where communities have gathered. For example, I know that like emergency room staff and like, medical, professionals, there's like a secret-ish forum somewhere. It may have been a thing of the day once where like
It was. I remember that
where
thing
they
actually.
Magicians. Also magicians. There's some forum for magicians somewhere.
How do you know? It might be a trick.
Possibly, but like, magicians and illusionists, there's a community for them that's somewhere on the internet that like you have to know to get it. There's like a handful of ivory towers out there for certain things, but most things, no.
So, yeah, I guess that's just how it goes. But I do want Obama to start a podcast. I would listen to that.
I think he's got better things to do.
I don't know. There's been some hints just from some interviews I've seen him give recently that he's pretty much just waiting to be out of the White House, and then he's gonna. I think he said something to the effect
He's
of,
still the president. You can still do stuff. Do stuff.
He said something to the effect of, "I'm gonna express what I'm actually thinking."
All right, go for it.
Yeah, we'll see. So, you got any news?
Well, it's Apple Week, and usually Apple Day happens like right as we're doing a Monday show, but this time it happened like a few days before.
Yeah,
but that's okay.
And right on the heels of that that Microsoft Surface Workstation whatever announcement.
Surface whatever it's called, Studio.
Yeah. I would consider buying one of those if it weren't for the fact that I also play games and I want a 1080 instead of a 980M. But that's a pretty solid, for real professional workstation there with that monitor.
It's okay. I mean,
it's hard to get good monitors like that.
The iMac still has a better screen. The iMac has way more pixels.
Yep.
The iMac just has a wider aspect ratio, right?
That is true.
Yeah, but anyway, so yeah, Apple announced mostly their MacBook. Right, some useless Apple TV nonsense, whatever. But pretty much the MacBook is the news, right? So what they do on the MacBook. Everyone was waiting for this, myself included, because like at work, I got a Lenovo like X220. It's way old, right? But actually, there's nothing wrong with it, right? It's got the built-in Intel video card thing, which is all you need if you're not doing anything 3D ever, which is I'm at work. I'm using SSH, right? I don't need NVIDIA or ATI anything, right? Even like a 1050 is too much for work. It's got an i7. It's got SSDs. It's got, 8 gigs of RAM. I can plug my mouse and keyboard.
8 gigs of RAM. My laptop from 2009 has 8 gigs of RAM.
That's mostly my problem, right? Is I need, because I'm using VirtualBox and stuff, I need 16 or 32, but the laptop cannot hold that much. It's already full. So I'm like, well, the new MacBook is coming. It'll probably be, not only be able to have 16 or 32 gigs of RAM, but will be way better than this, and I can just switch to that, and it'll be fine.
But no, the general consensus is that the new MacBooks are not significantly more powerful than the old MacBooks.
No, I mean, that was the big thing, right? Is they did a bunch of usual controversial Apple stuff, right? They got rid of all the ports except for 4 USB-C/Thunderbolt ports.
Which, as many people have already pointed out, 4 is not enough for the average professional in a creative space.
Right, so if you're the kind of person who's just taking this thing and walking around town with it, right? That's not really a big deal because, you're going to need a dongle to, connect your iPhone to it or, whatever, but you're not really going to plug a dongle to connect your SD card from your camera. But really, you're not going to do too much of that if you're really using it as a notebook. But if you're using it at a desk, which a lot of people do, they take their MacBook to work. It's at a desk most of the time, plugged into stuff. They even showed, demoed, and promoted LG making this monitor because if they truly have given up on making standalone cinema displays, even though they're stupid. If they sold 5K cinema displays, even
I would pay a lot of money. I would just buy them.
Even for $1,000, people would buy them. But I guess they're saying buy LG's monitor instead. So they're showing you that you should take the MacBook and sit down at a desk with this LG monitor plugged into it. But then, in the picture they show promoting this, you see just like a MacBook next to this monitor. They're not showing you the reality, which is you're going to have 10 million dongles and a hub and all this crazy stuff connected to it in this big mess, right? They concentrate so much on making the device itself have less holes and be elegant. But in real life, what ends up happening is if you have a PC that has a million crazy holes in the back where it's ugly, you have neatly placed wires in the back and nothing in the front, and your desk actually looks, as a whole, ends up looking more beautiful than it does if you have a Mac and some sort of, jungle of snakes and donglies all over the place. But anyway, Apple has always done that. They just did it more extreme. And that's really what this MacBook is about. It's the trend that Apple has always had for the past X years, according to the Mac, but taken to the extreme, right? They've always overcharged you for RAM and storage compared to just buying it from Newegg. But now, it's even worse. We waited so long between this MacBook and the last MacBook, the biggest gap, yet it was the smallest incremental upgrade, the biggest price increase, right?
Yeah, for the cost of an upper-end one of these, I could build a goddamn supercomputer.
So I went and I'm like, maybe I can convince IT to let me just build a computer. And I went on Newegg and
That's what I did in my office. I built a $1,000 computer at work. It's a tiny guy.
I went on Newegg and I'm like, all right, can I make a work computer? I'm like, okay, work computer doesn't need a video card. I need the tiniest case. I need an ITX motherboard with an Intel built-in whatever, right? The i5 that has the Intel built-in video card thing, right? I need a power supply that fits in the tiny case, 32 gigs of RAM, an SSD. That's it. I don't think I need anything else.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, at work,
a case, a power supply,
what
a
do I need
CPU.
at work? I need virtualization because I run a whole bunch of VMs.
Case, power supply, CPU, one drive, RAM sticks.
Yeah.
Did I forget anything?
Now for my
I guess I
GeekNights home
could
stuff,
put if I really wanted to, I could spend like $150 and put like the weakest NVIDIA 1050 video card in there just because it's going to be so cheap. So I did this, and it only costs like $1,100, and it's basically a god.
But it's not thin.
It was actually crazy thin. It's not as thin as a MacBook.
Yeah,
but it was crazy thin. It was the tiniest case I could find. Has a special something SX power supply that's really thin and modular and whatever. I mean,
I don't even know who tweeted it, but they said something like, the MacBook is revolutionary as a 2012 era gaming laptop.
Yeah, pretty much, right? It's like they don't realize that, like, hey, sure, the Mac is only 10% of your business now, right? But you haven't updated your stupid black Mac Pro trash can since you announced it. And
that thing was underpowered when it was launched.
And you're calling it and you're selling it for $5,000, right?
Yeah, you said $3,000 for $5,000. I wouldn't even know what to spend the last like $800 on building a computer.
I already got I got four 1080s in here, but I don't know.
That's already like a RAID of SSDs inside of it, like 2 terabyte SSDs.
Right. I've said this, and you can go back to old GeekNights, and I'll be saying the same thing. Why don't they just do X? They would destroy the entire industry. And X is either A, they could just let you sideload apps on the iPhone, Android would die immediately. It would just be like, oh, why use Android now? The iPhone is now open. We can make any software and avoid the App Store. Game over. It would just, right? It's like, sure, they'd make a little less money selling apps in the App Store, but who gives a shit? Your competition would be gone. You would sell every person with an Android phone, when those phones got old, would buy an iPhone because there's no other choice.
Half the market for Android phones is people who want to spend like $100 on a phone.
Yeah, you can get the iPhone SE.
That's more than $100.
Not the old one. Anyway, the other thing they could do is just make a Mac that's like godly, right? You could even charge more for it, right? You could sell $3,000 worth of hardware for $4,000 or $4,500, right? And if it was actually high spec, people wouldn't be complaining. If you put a fucking 1080 in there with your 5K screen and 32 gigs of RAM and the best i7 and just max it the fuck out,
I guess
no one's going to be like, oh, $4,000. They're going to be like, well, okay, this would normally be $3,000 if I bought it and built a PC, but I'm getting it as a Mac with its amazing engineering and its Apple Care and all that stuff.
The people
and it still has the best screen and the best touchpad, right?
The people who actually care about using this
that's worthy of
in
markup.
a professional capacity, only a tiny percentage of them, because this is already a tiny percentage of the market, only a tiny percentage of the people who even buy a MacBook actually need even a baby powerful computer. Like, they don't use it for anything except checking their email and maybe some like light Photoshop.
Right,
or
but that's not the Mac Pro, right? If you're just doing
but the Mac
if you're
Pro,
doing the light email, you get the iPad, right?
Nah, usually
the
those
MacBook
people,
Pro
corporations are very unwilling to buy iPads for their employees. They still want a computer.
If you watch the presentation, right, they are promoting this as something you would, they don't show people using it to like, do spreadsheets, right? They show people using the MacBook Pro to edit videos, to edit photos in a professional capacity, right? They have Adobe on stage, right? This is what the MacBook Pro is for. That's why it has the word Pro on it, and it's not good enough. It's a piece of garbage. Anyone who actually needs to edit video can't get by with this thing because it's so weak ass. Right? And it costs more than the alternative.
Yeah, but I'm saying the market is so small of the people who actually use these things for those purposes. I think most people who buy MacBook Pros don't actually use that power that they have, as minimal as it is.
Right, but here's what's going to happen is all these people who, now are using Macs, like web developers all use Macs. The next time it comes around, they're going to be like, well, I guess I'm not getting a Mac just because it's so weak. And then when the developers leave, they're going to lose, You can't make an iPhone. People are only going to have like a Mac lying around for when they need to write an iPhone app or something like that. They're going to lose all the support of the community of people actually make shit. And that's going to have a negative sort of, downwards effect on, the rest of everything, right?
At the same time, I feel like a lot of people who buy Macs already don't really understand that much about the deep end. Like, they don't know that much about hardware because they bought a Mac already, like a MacBook Pro. They've never been the most powerful laptops. So I feel like
they've been powerful enough, right? So it's like if you bought the last generation MacBook.
I feel like for web developers whose companies just buy these things for them anyway, this is still powerful enough.
If you look at the last generation MacBook, it's like, yeah, it was, you could have always gotten, right, a better PC for the same money. But it wasn't so much more money, and it was still pretty good at the time, right? It's like, yeah, okay, that's like a top-of-the-line laptop, basically, and you're getting the touchpad and the screen, so it's like, yeah, you spend a little bit extra money, but you're getting your money's worth-ish, losing a bit extra. And they overcharge you on the RAM, but hey, it's ECC RAM, which PCs can't even use these days, right? Yeah. But now it's just like, wow, you're just pissing away $1,000 for nothing.
Well, it's thin. That's the thing. It's super thin.
There's a point at which, it's like
I still much prefer my old Lenovo because while it's not
like thin,
that thing's like an inch thick. But you know what? Yeah. It's small in every other dimension.
I like thinness and smallness, right? If you get the 13-inch MacBook, it's smaller and thinner than your Lenovo, right? Which is great. Yeah. I love that part. But there's a point at which it's like the extra thinness isn't really a big improvement, right? It's like I'd rather, the previous MacBook size, even, the first all aluminum unibody MacBook was kind of thick. It was like, a little under an inch maybe. It was, by today's standards, it was thick, right? It's like, that's still thin enough. No one's going to complain about that. And if you made it that thick and you loaded it up with like a 1080, right? No one's going to give a fuck that it's only 3/4 of an inch and not as thin as a sheet of paper.
I think it's just hard for Apple internally to justify investing in the creator side of things much because that is a relatively small market compared to the I just use an iPad and look at shit model. iPads are way easier for them to sell.
Right. Well, what's going to happen is all the people who do creative type things like Photoshops and whatnot will move to PCs. And
so they'll be using like their semi-custom sandbenders.
Right. Adobe will stop making like Photoshop for Mac some years, 5 to, however many years from now, right? People stop, all professional creators will stop using it. And then won't be tools for the Mac. There all the trickle down things that developers and creative people make, right, won't be going down to the Mac consumers, and the Mac will become a less attractive platform for consumers as well as professionals.
Well, also, I noticed that in certain areas, there's big overlap between gamers and creatives, and very few people, I think, are going to get a super expensive Mac for their work life and build a giant gaming PC for the gaming aspect of their life. So if you're already a gamer, then you have a super powerful creator workstation at your desktop. And if you're already a creator who uses a Mac, you'd have to buy an entirely separate $1,000+ computer to play games. Because no one makes games on Macs anymore because not that many people have Macs anymore who play games.
So, even though initially might only make, a very small number of people upset, over the long haul, if they don't fix it, it's gonna hurt the rest of the environment of Apple, right? People who can code aren't buying Macs, therefore they're not writing software for Macs.
Well, we
iPhones.
famously, and I had to pay out on a bet because I made a bet publicly on GeekNights many years ago where we argued that Apple was going to end the actual PC style Macs and move to basically just iPads and like shitbooks, and they actually didn't, and they're still making this stuff. But as we've seen here, as this whole news is about, they're barely making them. Like, this is minimum effort.
Maybe that's intentional. Maybe they want the Mac to sell so poor. Like, if they just cut the Mac off, right? Like, if they just came out the other day and said, all right, no more Macs. We're not making money on it. It's such a small part of our business. Fuck it, right? Then people would be, like, crazy up in arms. But this way, they can go and, so, a year or two from now, be like, look, we tried our best, investors, to update this Mac and get it to sell, and no one bought it, and we're losing money on it. So now we're justified in ending it. And people won't be upset because they won't be Mac users anymore to be upset. Everyone will have abandoned the platform already. They have to abandon it first, then they can cut it off. You can't cut it off and force everyone away from it.
All right. I'll do my quick news. Yeah, maybe we'll just do that and go straight to the main bit.
What are the news is there?
I'll just do this because it's quick. So in other news, just kind of slightly irrelevant to the main bit today, but attack vectors for devices like phones or computers or your Internet of Things nonsense.
Isn't this the main bit?
No, so there is an attack vector. I think I've mentioned this offhandedly on a couple of Geek Nights, but we haven't really talked about it in depth. But there's a lot of apps you can install on your phone that get permission to use your microphone. You don't think much about it.
Listen, if something asks for like GPS, I usually just think, do I need this app to know my GPS? What is it going to use it for? For example, I put the Ticketmaster app, and it was like, I want to use your GPS. And I'm like, oh, you're going to look for concerts like nearby? All right, I don't give a shit, right? But like if you install some other app, like this is a notepad. What are you using the GPS for? No, you can't.
It wants access to all your files. It wants root on the phone.
In fact, uninstall because you asked, right?
Of course, so one interesting attack vector that someone demonstrated a proof of concept for a while ago was that I think accelerometer data is not protected. Like any app can get it no matter what.
Yeah, no one gives a shit.
So someone wrote a clever app that can figure out exactly where in New York City you are pretty accurately. If you use the subway at all, it can figure out based on timing and motion with increasing accuracy the longer you're on the subway exactly what station you're at.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How did they do that?
Because every different trains and different subways, like there's particular events along the way. So if you get enough data, you can sort of just do some.
But I mean, so they collected data originally, like they rode the N train back.
Yeah, they
and
collected
forth
a bunch of data
and said, okay, this is what the vibrations look like on the N train.
to look for patterns on particular trains, particular stations, particular days.
But you had to build up the data first. You couldn't just do it from nothing.
Well, it's kind of like in Britain, how you can use the hum of the mains in the background to identify the time that a video or some audio was recorded.
Sure.
Similar thing. But I mean, that was obviously an academic proof of concept. But basically, there's this thing that's been going on for a while where phone apps will listen for sounds in the background that are transmitted subaudibly or inaudibly or high frequency by TVs and screens so that they can figure out like, oh, he's watching the Rangers game right now.
Yeah.
Or he saw this ad.
Yep.
So that stuff is not, because it's all like private companies doing it, and other than
the number one company that does it is Shazam.
Yep.
Which is why if I need to Shazam some song, I install Shazam, do it, and uninstall Shazam.
Yeah. So
because that's like it's the most advertising like thing. That's how they make all their money.
So there are demonstrable ways to use this as an attack vector. And there is, as far as, this is an article linking to some of the basics of this, there seems to be no rigor into the security of the APIs that look at and respond to this sound data.
Yeah, you say no, you don't have mic permission. It's on you.
Yeah, but you might be able to do it other ways. What if, if a webcam is plugged into something, if you get access to sound data.
That's why I unplug my webcam if I'm not using it.
Yeah, but this is an attack vector that is very poorly understood, and basically no one is looking at it. And apparently there's a lot of moves toward using this kind of communication with Internet of Things type stuff because it's really convenient and just works. So this is an attack vector that no one's looking at that's probably going to bite us in the butt later.
It's going to bite me in the butt.
We'll see.
I'll get some hidden microphone turned on.
You might. There might be a device that has a microphone you don't realize.
Maybe. That would be a real attack vector. You sell someone hardware that has hardware in it that they don't know is even in it.
Or you sell someone, I couldn't find the article again.
Like you don't know your refrigerator has a camera in it because it's so small and it's in like this tiny hole in the door, and now they're spying on you and sending video to the internet.
Yeah, who's going to even bother trying to figure that out?
And you know what? That doesn't even have to be something at the refrigerator manufacturer. That could be someone in a Best Buy installing those in the fridge doors.
Ooh.
Right? They could just do it.
So someone demonstrated, I'm not going to dig up the article, but they bought a webcam. This happened a couple times, but there's a really good in-depth story about it. Someone bought these webcams, like set them up in your house for security, and they decided they sucked, so they returned them. That's fine. Then, like, a couple months later, they got an email that was like, activity was detected on webcam number 4, and they were like, what? And sure enough, they logged into their account, and they could see some other dude's house.
Because it was a cloud-backed webcam security thing.
Like
not
most of
just,
those
not just a
things
regular old Logitech webcam, a
No.
security cloud one.
Yeah, most of those things have problems like that.
hmm
All right. Let me pull up the Gamer X thing, which I think is on.
You know what else you could do is you could just buy a bunch of webcams, right? And then in them insert basic USB sticks in parallel with the webcam that has a malware on it.
No.
And someone plugs in the webcam, and yeah, okay, the webcam part works, but you just got a malware on your computer. About this convention, go back to where all the people are.
Yep.
Go back again,
Alright.
where all the people are. That first person. That one.
Yep.
Right? Remember when I was like, oh, there's 2 book club books, you can pick Rebecca or the other one?
Oh, this is the other one?
That's the author of the other one.
Nice. Maybe I will do this next book
So I
club.
want to, whatever her panel is, I want to go.
Actually, I was looking at some of the panels. There's some good stuff going on here, like for real.
Because like that fantasy book that she wrote, or series that she wrote, is like the hottest hotness right now.
And the fact that
like
she's
everyone,
a guest here.
everyone is all about it. Like it's like the most. I've only seen like a million. You know, it's one of those things like you just keep seeing it everywhere. Everyone keeps hyping this thing up. It must be good.
All right, well, definitely we'll make that the next book club.
You just didn't want to read another fantasy book because you were all.
I didn't want to do 2 in a row. I just finished. I'm almost done.
We're
with that.
nerds. What kind of book do you want to read? A sci-fi book or a fantasy
I'm
book?
almost done.
You got 2 choices.
Careful, son. If you ever cross me, I'm almost done with that historical book on the technical details of the Battle of Midway.
I just won't read it. I don't think I could bring myself to read it. I just fall asleep.
You'd probably be interested in what the long section of the war games and how Yamamoto literally cheated at the fucking war game.
Okay.
Like the war game to simulate the battle, and basically some instant was like, "I'm gonna he played the
Wait, like
Americans."
they're like plan the battle like the olden days, like
Yeah.
we're gonna have this battle tomorrow.
No, so what they do is they did they would typically do war games in the Imperial Navy of Japan, like for real, like Kriegspiel style games,
Right.
just to practice. Like every they'd go on a ship, and like every cabin would be a ship, and the captains would yell orders and give reports, and they had this army of runners running around, and these game masters adjudicating, and all these lookup tables.
Nerds.
Yeah, so this basically this dude.
Let's
like,
get the rules for that game.
I'm actually trying to find out more details about it.
Get it published.
There's this book by Fuchida, which I've read another one of his books before. It's an old book, but I'm trying to find references to the rules of this naval war game, because it would basically be a hyper advanced version of Captain Sonar.
You know, we could just play
Captain Sonar.
Advanced Squad Leader.
But so at one point, someone playing the Americans got clever and had an aircraft carrier where they didn't expect and attacked and sunk like 3 of the Japanese carriers, but because the die rolls were just really good.
Isn't
Got
that
lucky.
isn't that what happens in the real world though?
Yeah, that is what happens in the real world. But the judge
It
was
sounds like a really good, well-made game if it so accurately simulates real life.
the anecdote is that the judge rolled 9 hits against these carriers and then
Americans have good aim.
paused the game, decided that was unrealistic, and scaled it down to 3 hits.
Oh, because they changed he didn't think the rules were accurately.
No, he needed the Japanese forces to win, so he cheated.
But you're trying to. Shouldn't you instead be like? You're basically trying to figure out how to beat the Americans. Shouldn't you be like, all right, worst case scenario, they roll so well and they fuck us. Let's not. You should just undo your last move and do a different move so that doesn't fuck you.
Yeah.
And then in the real war, do
Yeah.
the move that was a different move, and
Yeah.
then you won't have that happen.
So later, they said only
but hey,
one.
good they didn't win, right?
Yeah, I guess. But yeah, so later, so they were like, well, instead of 3 of them being sunk, only 1 got sunk, and the other one was slightly damaged. And then the one that was sunk, they quietly brought it back later, hoping no one would notice. Yeah. I guess the moral is,
yeah. Why would you do this? It's like you're not understand the purpose of
this book
simulation.
is a many 100-page explanation as to why they did this.
It's like you don't understand that what you're doing is supposed
The
to.
moral is the American Navy was pretty dysfunctional.
Like,
but the
dude,
Japanese Navy,
imagine if I could like be a football coach and could simulate the entire game beforehand. Like, why would I?
No,
Why would I give myself a touchdown?
It's a hockey simulator, and Ovi keeps coming in and scoring from that spot, and you're just like, nah, there's no way he'd be there. There's no way. Couldn't
no
happen.
way.
He couldn't get there.
Instead, Instead of being like, all right, let's undo. All right, defenseman, look, this is how OV comes in. You got to stand here, all right?
No, roll it back. Put OV 40 feet more back. There's no way he'd make it in time.
Yeah,
now.
he's way slow. He's not going to make it.
All right, I'm going to start with the meta. Things of the day. So it's an annual tradition on FARC, and I'm going to link to 2 of them just for your reference.
Oh, FARC.
I am a big fan of scary stories. Now, I'm not saying that I believe in ghosts. I'm saying that ghostly, cool stories are really good.
I like them if they're actual scary-like, but that's pretty rare.
Yeah. Now, my best...
I like a good ghost story. It's just hard to come by.
The best source of pretty good ghost stories...
I prefer a skeleton story.
...is FARC. Because every year, there's an annual tradition of having a thread where everyone tells scary stories. And it's about 1/3 people where something mundane happened to them, but they kind of wigged out for no reason. 1/3 weird shit where even the person is like, yeah, I'm pretty sure it wasn't ghosts, but it was a weird, freaky thing that I still can't explain, and they tell their story. And 1/3 people just writing short fiction that's usually pretty good. My favorite one of all time is a real story about Fishy. It basically was a dude.
How do you know it's real?
No, so the story is just
comment on FARC.
So the story is basically
is it on
just
Snopes?
I will read the story to the patrons on Patreon as a spooky story.
Yeah,
but
don't pay for that. Go to FARC and read it.
The
for free.
story is basically
or don't, because who cares?
A kid growing up. He had some mental issues, and basically, some kids will have an imaginary friend.
Sure.
So he had an imaginary friend.
All right.
And just the way the imaginary friend presented in his life is just really unnerving. And he just tells the story of like what it was like as a kid, just having this imaginary friend that he kind of couldn't make go away. And then when he grew up, like one day it disappeared, and that was the end of it. But it's just really, it's unnerving in ways that.
Oh, so the guy who had the imaginary kid is writing the thing.
Yeah, he wrote the thing. He was
pretending to, right?
He was like, so guys,
it's a first-person story.
Yes, this is what it was like for me with Fishy, growing up with Fishy.
Okay, so you know how in the olden days, like the 70s and the 80s, comedians would all be like, black man do this, white man do that.
Yeah, that was the thing.
That was like the Richard Pryor bit, right? Well, now Scott's bit is policeman do this, fireman do that.
That's like my dad when I was a kid.
So
there's a reason firemen come home to their families happy.
If you go on New York Police Department Twitter, you're on any given day, you're more than likely to see some post that's like, there's been an incident. We shot somebody. News coming. Well, if you go on fire department Twitter, which I only realized was a thing somewhat more recently, it's like, hey, we saved someone. Check it out. So, usually they save people all the time, usually for medical reasons, right? Like someone will have like I think the biggest thing they do actually is when some people have heroin overdoses and they go and they jab them with the whatever it's called, right? That's like the thing they do the most, more than fighting fires. But there was a fire, a pretty big fire. This apartment building was way on fire. 6-alarm fire, which means 6 different fire departments came there. All right, that's what that means.
That is what that means.
People don't know that. They're just like, what? They only know about that when they're talking about like chili. Like it's a 5-alarm chili. What does that mean? It means you need to call 5 fire departments to put out the fire.
No, it means
in
you need
your mouth.
you need to find 5 toilets.
Right, 5 ladders, 5 hoses. But anyway, so there's a 6-alarm crazy apartment fire, and someone was trapped. And this person was in a situation where they pretty much had 2 choices, which was A, burn, not a good choice. B, jump out the window, not a good choice. And he was pretty high up, so not a good choice. And normally you'd think, oh, well, the firemen would rescue them with put the ladder up to the window, walk up there, take him out of the window, and walk down, right? Or jump and land in a parachute thing like in Dumbo, whatever. But you're imagining, like when you see firemen in movies or TV shows or, whenever, and, the window that's burning is like facing the street in New York City. That's not how it is. You could get in a lot of situations where, like, you're trapped between a fire and a window, and out the window is like an alley, and there's no way the fire truck's getting anywhere near that. So what they do, and it's sort of obvious, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's the roof rope rescue. They practice this apparently all the goddamn time.
Triple R.
They practice this apparently all the goddamn time because obviously you're going to need it in New York City, which is where they use the ladder to go on the roof. They use a rope. They rappel down the side of the building. You grab onto the fireman or a fighter, and then they rappel to the bottom of the building with you, and then you run the fuck away. and that's what they do. It's exactly what it sounds like, but they did it, and because they practiced so much, it totally worked, and they saved this person and did not shoot them.
Yeah. There's a lot of the FDNY is notable too because it and the Detroit Fire Department are basically the only two fire departments that engage in a lot of rescue techniques that are actually really dangerous to the firemen themselves.
Yeah, this is not,
Like
even
most
though
other fire departments in the entire United States don't do a lot of the things that the
Right.
FDNY.
I can't
and the,
emphasize enough how much they practice this, which is why they were able to execute it without also getting burned horribly themselves. If
Yup.
you're in somewhere like a suburb with a volunteer fire department,
what they're going
and
to do.
you need to be roof rope rescued, you are probably in deep shit because those volunteers have not practiced it. Like, it's not their only job.
But if you live in suburbia, you probably live in a little McMansion or a 2-story house. You can just jump out the window.
Yeah, it's unlikely that you would be in a situation where you
But outside of a
needed
very
one.
small number of municipalities in the U.S., firemen will primarily just try to prevent the house next door from catching fire if there's a big fire.
Yep.
In the meta moment, the book club book is still Rebecca. I'm going to read it real soon.
Yeah, I will.
I mean, I'll just blow through it. I'm almost done with that World War II book I'm reading, which, goddamn, was Yamamoto kind of a shithead? But for reasons you wouldn't expect. But we are going to be, the next convention we're at is actually Saturday and Sunday, November 12th and 13th.
That's way soon.
Yeah, Gamer X as a gay.
How come we didn't know about this more in advance?
Well, I knew about it about a month ago, and I reached out to them saying, "Hey, you want some?"
That's pretty late for getting us onto a convention, but we're there, so
Yep. So we're gonna be there.
it's right around the corner. It's not a big
Playing
deal.
games 2 days, but on Sunday, November 13th at 3:30 p.m.
So the end of the convention, basically.
Yep, we are going to be doing.
They stuck us in at the end.
We're going to be doing an updated version of our talk on writing game rules.
All right.
Otherwise, if you live in New York City, you should totally go to this. It's 2 days of gaming.
Why wouldn't you?
It's
if
like a
you're
legit
gamer?
gaming con with legit panels.
I should tell the Netrunner people. Maybe get some Netrunner going on there.
Yeah. And also, looking through the list of speakers who are going to be at this thing, there's some heavy-hitting people here. Like, I'm actually kind of surprised and happy that they're letting us do a talk.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. So, if nothing else, it's just a legit gaming con. We're also going to be at MagFest. It's too soon to do the roar. It's coming. I'm saving it. Saving my laser. Between me and
Can you hear it
Scott-
over there? It's like 2 months
You
away.
can hear it in the distance. By God, is that MagFest?
It's coming.
We're going to be on, between Scott and I, we're going to be on like 7 goddamn panels. I'm looking at the schedule. There's some good stuff coming. Can't talk about it yet because I haven't published the schedule yet. But we're going to be doing 2 or 3 of our standard lectures, and the rest is going to be me on panels, like actual panels, as in people talking about a topic where there's more than just me and Scott, and I don't know the questions in advance. Scott doesn't want to be on any of those panels, so he'll just be doing the lectures.
I'll just play some Dig Dug.
Yeah, I'll play
Why
some
would,
Big
why
Doug.
would I do a panel when I could play Dig Dug? Maybe I'll have a thing where if you beat Scott at Dig Dug, you get a prize.
Oh, we could do a standing. We should definitely do some sort of GeekNights meetup or whatever at MagFest. Like pick a time to all hang out and do a dumb tournament on some arcade machine.
I can make a in-person tournament, like a 4-game sort of thing, where like the top X finishers of game 1.
Yep.
Like a little mini pro megathon.
We gotta find a listener who is good at one of these games to be the mini boss, so they can play people for like 3 days and then present the 4 finalists to us.
High score games are the best because people can just post their high scores.
Oh yeah. So basically, every time you beat the high score,
And then we get to a
like,
final
tweet
showdown.
it at Scott, being like, "Hey, I beat your Dig Dug score," and then we got to go over there and beat it again.
Yep.
That could work. Stay tuned. We'll sort that out. Otherwise, so GeekNights is on Patreon. There's stuff in there. I'm reading to you, like an audiobook, the entirety of Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest, with the Worlds of Power novelization of that game. It is weirdly erotic, is how I'm going to describe this book. Otherwise, Scott is busting out on his YouTube channel. I'm continuing to put stuff up on my YouTube channel.
I realized something, though. I have a problem.
Yeah?
Is that, I don't need your little knob. Not lack of knob.
The knob would speed you up more than you think.
I am not slowing down because of the knob. I'm slowing down?
Rendering?
No, I just really hate editing things.
Oh,
like,
God.
I really like taking photos and taking videos. I really do not like. It's like it's not fun to use Premiere or
Yeah,
Lightroom.
Scott, you
it's
know
like
what?
it's like work. It sucks. I don't want to do it. If
I don't
someone
like
else,
videoing things. I'm good at editing things.
If somebody else wants to edit videos for me, I can send you so much video footage that you could turn into awesome YouTube videos, and you would get mad I'll give you monies
Scott,
because
I would do it.
I'm not gonna be that guy who gives you exposure, right? And then I can reduce my Creative Cloud subscription to just the Photoshop Lightroom one and stop paying for Premiere.
Scott, I would do it, but I don't think you want to pay my rates.
Well, you also do a really shitty job with
I'm
like
pretty good at this stuff.
really lame-looking fonts that look like some 3-year-old.
Oh, I would subcontract out infographics and motion graphics. That's
like,
a separate thing.
Like your title car is just like.
You're talking about just
so
audio
lame.
editing, video editing, that kind of stuff? I charge
Yeah.
$2.30 an hour.
Sure.
All right.
It's like every time I go sit at the computer and it's like, oh, should I edit this video? I'm gonna play some Civ 6.
You know what it is?
I'm gonna play some Civ 6, I think.
So like our early days doing panels, it would take me like 4 full days of editing to edit something together. Now it takes me about 3 hours.
Yeah, I don't even if I could just play Civ 6 for 3 hours.
Yeah. But I made a pipeline. You gotta have your ingress. You gotta dump your source files into the auto ingest.
I know what to do. I just don't want to do it because when I start doing it, I'm just like, this
But a video
this
like
is
that
not fun.
shouldn't take you that long. Like
If I actually forced myself to do it, it wouldn't take long at all. It's just not fun, so I don't want to. So I do something else instead.
yeah. Well, maybe my YouTube channel is gonna have a lot more stuff than yours. All right. Anyway, let's see.
It's just
Main bit.
unpleasant. It's
I
like
find it
it's
okay
like it's like
pleasant.
I could eat this cookie. I could eat it in like one bite. It's just one cookie, but it tastes so bad. So I nibble it like once and then I spit it out and then I go eat a delicious cookie.
I think of it more like a task where I don't want to do it, but output comes out of the end, and all I care about is the output. So, like a programmer
Well,
who
if
doesn't give a
it's
shit,
eating a cookie, poop is coming out. So
yeah, I'm making
and
that poop
if it's a disgusting
as
cookie,
fast as possible.
it's a smelly poop.
Like I'm going for the poop faster than you can imagine. All right, let's do the main bit. So I was in Australia for a couple weeks, and everything was fine. And Scott messaged me.
Well, because of the time zones, I'd pretty much like, if something, above the bar happened in the United States, I would message Rim, assuming he was sleeping, and figured I would wake up the next day
and you'd
with
scoop
a
everybody.
response.
And this happened multiple times because actually newsworthy things kept happening. And one of those things.
Well, you were gone for 2 weeks. I assume at least a few newsworthy things would happen.
Yeah. The only thing I was sad about is I didn't get to watch the debate live because it was literally it ended up being at noon on a weekday, and I was literally at a meeting for work during it.
Okay.
But I watched all these things go down over Twitter, except this one, because no one in the U.S. could tweet. So I couldn't see, all I could see was the tweet stream of people, coming back online from this massive internet outage, which was actually just a DNS outage.
Yeah, so
and no one knows how to get around basic DNS problems, apparently.
Well, okay, so let me tell you. So I woke up in the morning, and I tried to go to our forum, and it doesn't work. It says, can't find server. And I'm like, what? I'm like, is Vanilla having a problem? So I tried to go to some other sites, and some of them work, and some of them don't. And I'm like, that's weird. So, there are other sites that aren't working, but there are some sites that are working. What's the difference? So I'm like, all right, step 1, dig our forum. And it's I'm using Google's, DNS servers, 8888, whatever. And it says, nope, can't find no IP for that. And I'm like, uh-oh, that doesn't sound right. But wait a minute. It wasn't like I couldn't contact the DNS server. The DNS server said, I don't know what IP that is. And I'm like, why don't you know? So I checked with the registrar.
Yep.
And everything is kosher. So I didn't fuck anything up. No one stole our domain or anything.
Yep, those things can happen.
Right.
Even to smart people.
Even though I secured it way good, right? So then I'm like, all right, what else is going on? So I dig some other domains that are working, and I get IPs back. And I'm like, okay, so the Google DNS server is actually working just fine. It must be something upstream is not in the hierarchy, is messed up. And I knew it was a DNS problem. So I go to Twitter, because whenever there's a problem that's super fast, you're not going to find news on Google News for another hour. You got to go to Twitter.
Yeah, but Twitter's got nothing, probably.
Twitter was one of the things that were down.
Yeah.
So I don't know where to search now.
You know what sucks? In the old days, if we were still at RIT, we'd all get into an IRC or something, or Napster chat.
Right. So I basically go around to news sites until I find something that's up. Reddit was having trouble. I found some news source, and it was big time DDoS attack against DYN DNS.
Yep, Dyn DNS provides DNS to a lot of people because remember, DNS is just this framework. The only official DNS servers are the 13 root servers that say, "Yo, internet that way."
So it's like, yeah, it's like, sure, all DNS does is let us use names for servers instead of IP addresses. If I remembered the IP address to the forum, I could have just typed it in and gone there, right?
Yep.
But who fucking remembers the IP address?
Well, you know
right?
what? You know what?
Like, the internet would totally work without DNS if everyone remembered and hard-coded IP addresses. Like, you have to remember that Google is 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is, right? It's not 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like
the whole
66,
point of names
70,
in the old days
something.
was that humans, you would remember names, which is funny because now, like, we kind of don't anymore. Like, DNS is not used the way it was used in the early days.
Yep.
Like, DNS names now are just soft links, pointers to where the real thing is so the real thing can move.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the tie to your SSL certificate.
Mm-hmm.
Like, those are the only things that it's really used for in the modern era.
Yep.
So, like, these extra top level, we've talked about DNS. I don't want to get too into that.
There's
but
DNS episodes.
the funny thing is, if we were still living in Beacon when this happened, we would have been fine. Because back then, we ran our own DNS server with caching.
Yeah, someone wrote this great article that was like, hey, everybody, this should teach you a lesson. I know that none of you are going to read this and learn this lesson or change what you're doing. You're going to still do things the wrong way. But everyone is setting their DNS TTLs way too short. You got to jack them up.
Yeah, but
right?
Why do you set it so short? You don't change that often.
People set their TTLs short so that when it is time to change, they can change it and have the change happen really quickly.
Yeah, now
Whereas if you set your DNS TTL to something reasonable like a day, 8 hours, something like that, then if you need to change to different server infrastructure and move your DNS, you have to wait 8 fucking hours to do this changeover thing. And it's just like, it sucks at that one moment. So just to make your life more convenient, that one rare time you actually have to do something, you basically throw away you're basically telling every DNS server on Earth, hey, don't remember my IP address for very long, right? Just throw it out after a few minutes and then look it up again. And what this does is, A, if shit goes down, all these DNS servers around the Earth forget your IP address and have to ask for it again. And if you're down, you're down. And 2, it creates a lot of bandwidth. There's all these extra DNS requests now going farther up the hierarchy of the DNS infrastructure.
It is shocking how many requests make their way all the way up to root and back down.
Yeah, they could have just hit like a server, for example, if I ask I'm asking Google's DNS, but let's say most of you are using your ISP's DNS, like you're asking Time Warner or Charter or whoever, right? So, or Verizon, on my iPhone, like I'm using Verizon, right? So it would just ask Verizon and get an answer. But if my TTL is 5 minutes, 5 minutes later, Verizon's going to have to ask my DNS provider for the IP again. Whereas if I would have just told Verizon, hey, remember that shit for like a day, it would only ask my server once a day for every Verizon user.
Now,
a way
around this is what I would do in the past when I used to administer to this sort of thing, is I would set up, granted, this was an older time, like shit's moved fast, but I would have pretty long TTLs, but I would set it short in advance of coming changes.
Right, but if you know you're doing some sort of release and you're really clever and well organized, you can set it short a day in advance.
Yeah.
Right, or far enough in advance.
Like
then
2 weeks in advance.
Then after you know it's good, set it, and you're stable with the new environment, set it long again.
Now, here's the trouble. Some people set it short for failover disaster recovery ways so that they can quickly redirect in a failover, which you literally cannot schedule. But if you care about uptime that much, you should have dynamic IPs to begin with. Like, or not dynamic IPs in the classic sense. You should have, there's special IPs you can get that you can sort of reroute on the fly, even on the internet. Or like within your organization, you can get layer 3 switches that perform like switches, but at the
Amazon
IP
Web Services has elastic IPs where if one of your servers, you can buy basically an IP address and point it at a server, and now that server has that IP, and if that server, say, completely sets on fire and you need to make a new server, you can move that IP to the new server.
So one thing I'm going to do, because I'm going to have spare computers soon when I fairly soon start upgrading all my biz, is I'm probably going to start running a local DNS server again with caching, because that actually is a big performance boost, especially if you're accessing sites where DNS queries are slow, and it would have protected you from
Right, but
a good chunk of this.
if you override the TTLs that they send you with your own longer TTL, you could end up in situations where if something happens to them, you think they're down, and you go toisup.me and they go, oh no, they're up.
Yeah.
And you're like, ah, shit, and you got to flush your DNS cache.
Yep. But I could run a squid proxy too and just go double.
That's, then you're getting websites that aren't even updated. You're getting seeing like
Yep.
an old version of the news because it hasn't been updated yet.
Partly I want to do it just because I haven't run that kind of infrastructure in a long time, so I want to see what the current state of it is. If there's anything clever I can do
it's
that I
same
couldn't
as it
do in the
always was.
past.
You know what? The best thing you can do with it is you can offload ad blocking off of your own computer to the other computer, and you can do ad blocking that's even better than. For example, like if there's a certain ad server, you can just block all traffic to it, and now it doesn't matter what browser you're using, or like if you're using a phone or every single device on your network will now have that ad server completely blocked because you blocked it at this sort of proxy level.
So what actually happened here, as best we can tell, is it was a simple.
We still don't know who did it or why, right?
I read some evidence that it's probably some script kiddies who took advantage of things that may have been placed by state-sponsored actors, because the Mirai malware.
Right. So I heard about the tools, right? So we don't know the user of the tools.
That's the one that the source code got leaked recently.
Right. We don't know the user of the tools or the motivation for using them to attack Dyn DNS specifically, but we do know that the tool was made open source recently, and usually what happens is somebody will make, people who are like the real black hats of the world will make evil tools, right? But since they made those evil tools, if they use them, now they can sort of be found by the intelligence community as aha, this was the tool that was used. It must have been Rim. Yep. He made that tool. So what you do is, while you're still anonymous, you sort of make your tool open source. So plausibly, anyone could have used it. And now when you use it, they don't know who it was. It could have been anyone because it's just some open source tool.
Now, the malware itself is nothing special, except that
imagine if you had a gun and you're going to shoot somebody. But if you do that, they'd be like, aha, this was the gun used in the murder and it's got fingerprints on it. You're like, shit. So you make 1 billion infinity identical guns and hand them out to everybody. And now it could have been any one of us. Everyone has that gun. Who did it?
So in the old days, malware like this, when you activated a botnet, because the machines that had this were botted. They're part of a botnet effectively.
Mm-hmm.
They would themselves initiate the DDOS.
Mm-hmm.
However it was run. That is old style.
Yep.
This botnet is a meta command and control layer that would, when activated, itself go out and activate a giant legion of even dumber bots. And it appears that those bots were almost entirely Internet of Things nonsense, fridges and DVRs and cameras and shit.
Right, so people are using PCs less and less these days. So there's
Which actually reduced the effectiveness of bots.
Right, there's still lots of PCs out there. I'm sure you can make a nice botnet out of Chinese PCs or whatever.
Yeah.
But, and people are, going to things like Windows 10, they're upgrading, they're using OS X more and such. So there are less vulnerable PCs in the wild to make a bot, to, infest and make a botnet out
I mean,
of.
how many people actually pirate Adobe software to join that botnet? It's
right.
It's a large number, but it's not that many.
It's not as many as it used to be.
It's not as many as the traffic that goes to the sites you're trying to DDoS on a normal basis.
Right, and not only that, but it's if you attack PCs, there's not so many users of them, right? They're not even a good target. Even though you do the thing that's nice about attacking PCs is that they're really powerful.
Yeah.
Right? If you get one PC, that's as good as getting 6 phones. But anyway, so people have phones and tablets now, and those are actually also, as if they're running, modern Android, iOS, they're kind of hard to infect.
You got to go out of your way to get infections on these devices.
It's you can, the security patches for them usually come out pretty quick. And while there are various vulnerabilities, there's always those pwn to own events. Usually you have to have access to the device to own it, right? It's something that you can get through the lock screen, or if they visit a shady website and do a thing.
Or the speakers are running and then they get that sound gap thing I talked about earlier.
Yeah, but it's really... It's not easy to make a botnet out of iPads, right? It's pretty tricky. So what do you make a botnet out of these days? And that is devices that are internet connected that people don't realize.
So think about your like shit ass router that you get with your internet service provider like 5 or 6 years ago.
You've never updated the firmware on it ever.
It came with the default username,
Even
the default password.
Right, even my fancy router hasn't had a firmware update in I don't even know when.
Yup.
Right?
Now think about if you go on Amazon and buy some random TiVo knockoff and just plug it into your home internet and it just works. You don't know what the fuck's running on that or what it's doing. How would you even know if it was compromised? At least your computer might run slow.
Yeah, and let's say you go to the store and you buy like, some home internet security device, right? So these kinds of devices that people make, they're using, how do you make something like this? There's certain features you want, like maybe a garage door opener for your house, right?
So say you want to control that garage door opener from your phone. That's a cool thing to sell to someone.
Right.
Either the phone has to connect directly to it, which is not going to work.
Which it could work, but it's just too difficult to make that work. Now
also, even if they did make it work, it would be just as insecure. What, you're going to run Jetty in there? Have some Apache running on? There'd be a server that no one updates.
Yeah, you'd have to have like a whole computer in your garage door opener. That's fancy.
That no one's going to be
now,
updating.
The person in their car has to know how to connect to it with Wi-Fi or with Bluetooth or something complicated, and there's like a whole process they have to go through, and that's not going to work. You need a situation where the person pushes a button and the door opens, and it's simple. And the only way to do that architecturally is to say, okay, the garage door opener connects to the internet with Wi-Fi, their phone connects to our server, they visit a web page on our server, they log in, they press a button, and then we connect we know who it is, so we know which garage door opener it is, so we connect to the garage door opener of the internet and open it.
Now, there's nothing wrong with this in theory. I mean,
you could make that possibly secure.
Just some SSL and basic security principles.
I mean, there's a way to make it secure.
But usually it's all clear text. Like security is not even the last concern when they make these devices. It is not thought about at all.
Right.
Think about a college project where you have to write an app to do something like this. You send a clear text, not even a password. You just send a command and you get the act back, and then you submit the code and get your B. Mm-hmm. That is what's running on these devices.
So now you have an evil bot, and the evil bot just goes around the internet looking at IP addresses, trying to figure out what device is at that IP address, what's it running, what's it doing. So it goes around the internet. It's just hitting stuff, pinging and ponging and whatever. And it says, oh, here's an IP address, and there's a device here. What kind of device is this? Let me scan all the ports.
Oh, it's a Sean My Technologies DVR? Well, I know the hard-coded username and password for that.
Let me try to log into this DVR. Oh, look, I've logged into this DVR. I'm not even a real person. I'm just searching the internet for things, and this is one of the things that I'm pre-programmed to know about. I have now connected to it. I have full access to it. I will install this software on it, and it will continue to do its DVR thing until such a time as I tell it to attack DNS.
I saw multiple people I know who are smart when the DDoS happened. Afterward, they did things like start doing a packet capture of their internet traffic egress and seeing, wow, 60 megabits a second coming out of my DVR.
Right, yeah. All those smart TVs that people buy because they have like Netflix built in. They don't have to buy a Roku.
Yeah, my TV has a network and Ethernet port on the side of it.
Yeah,
Guess
mine
what's
does.
never getting plugged into
Never
that port?
getting plugged into anything ever, right? So it's like, yeah, if that phone doesn't keep getting, if that TV doesn't get updated with security updates and such, and it's like they wrote software for it once, they shipped it, they were done with it, they don't give a shit
Meanwhile,
anymore.
the only TVs that update are the ones that are updating to show you ads in the menus.
Yeah. I'm only getting, that's why I get monitors, not TVs.
Yep.
But anyway, yeah, someone just take over your TV, and you're watching TV, but meanwhile, the TV itself is attacking, sending spam or something. You don't even know.
Yeah. And I don't know when this will, I mean, the technology exists for this all to work fine. It's just the consumers of these devices, at least a consumer of a PC or a tablet or something else, has some level of understanding as to what that device is capable of. But when they buy like a garage door opener, they do not make the leap to, this is a computer.
Yeah.
So they don't even know there could be a problem.
They're selling fridges at this Home Depot, and those fridges have Android running on them. And no one really pays attention. And, people get upset if their Android phone doesn't get updated to the newest candy, whatever it is, right? Kit Kats or, Jujubes or whatever the fuck. But you don't care a shit about updating the Android on your fridge.
So back it up to the actual response as a human to the DDoS.
And now your fridge is spying on someone's email.
Even if you had your caching DNS a lot of the services you might have tried to access were failing anyway because internally they relied on DNS as well.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of time that internal DNS has the exact same problems the external. Like a lot of Linux servers, if you set up a Linux server and you just kind of slapdash about it and you don't put like at least a reference to localhost or your own IP address or something in your host file.
Usually that's there by default.
Yeah, but it's easy to fuck that up. Or
how could you fuck that up?
I have witnessed more than once overly clever admins saying, "Why would I have an entry for this in my host?" and removing
I'm pretty sure in Ubuntu, actually, if you don't
Ubuntu does it by default.
It does it by default, and if you don't have the hostname entry in the host file, when you do certain things like sudo, it'll be like, hey,
yep.
Why don't you have this?
A lot of Linux distro, like certain software, like in the boot sequence even, it'll just wait forever and eventually time out on stuff because it tries to initialize something that needs localhost or needs IP access before the DNS stuff activates and actually starts looking stuff up. But the only solution to that is like the best practice is if you run a real network, even though you want stuff to be dynamic, if you have like a critical front-end web server that accesses a critical back-end database server, you should have fucking host files pointing directly at those internal IPs on the servers, and you just have scripts that change those in the event of a failover. You also use DNS.
You also that gets you a lot of performance improvement because you're saving all this DNS traffic.
That does. I'll tell you what, I used to do with this complex system involving some middleware, some tibrv, and we found that just by putting, with no other changes, just by putting standard host files that had all the core systems internal to our network in those host files, we got like a 10% performance improvement.
Yeah, if there's a website that you visit like crazy often, like say google.com, it's like if you do a dig for google.com, you're going to get a ton of IPs back, and it changes pretty frequently based on where you are.
And there's load balancing and all this
yeah,
other
there's all
stuff
this kind of stuff that goes on. But odds are, if you pick just a Google IP that like you got when you're at your house, that IP is going to keep working for quite a long time. If you just put it in your host file, you're going to have a much faster google.com until it stops working.
In fact, way back, remember when there was a lot of trouble in New York years ago with YouTube like not working?
I don't do
well?
that though. I'm too lazy.
Yeah, but like
remember
YouTube like wouldn't work that well. Like you'd get the first 10 seconds of a video and then you couldn't watch the rest of it.
Oh, that was a short period of time, yeah, where it's messed up.
Yeah, while that existed, if you were clever, you could use host files to force your usage of YouTube from like beyond the caching servers to the back end to only use the nodes that were probably working, and that made the YouTube situation better. And then it broke everything later because, you know, that stuff changes. But
yeah, I mean, it's, you know, the
host files are something that you should use because they're a powerful weapon, but also remember that you used them.
Yeah, the DNS failover is a good strategy, right? It's like, you know, you have your DNS, you know, look, and you could even do geo stuff these days where it's like, aha, this user who's asking for the IP address of frontrowcrew.com, they are in New York, so I will tell them this answer. Oh, this person is in Bulgaria. I will tell them a different answer because I have a different web server in that part of the world, and it will be faster for them.
Or like, put your SSL up on Cloudflare and use that.
No, Cloudflare does. That's one of the things Cloudflare can do.
Yeah, Cloudflare is actually pretty good. I've been using it
Amazon
more
Route
and more.
53 can also do this, right?
Yep.
You know, there's so many things that can do this, right? It's like a standard feature these days. But, you know, or it's like, oh, the DNS server will say, aha, this server is down. I will tell them the IP address of a server that is up instead. But if your TTL is really long, that kind of feature doesn't work because the person, you know, the server goes down, they try to visit it, they get the cached IP address, which is the IP of the server that's down, and they see that you're down. And they never ask you for the new IP address till the TTL's over. And if your TTL is like 8 hours, you're going to be down for, if you don't bring that server back up at the same IP, you're going to be down for 8 hours for that person, even if you're up for other people who aren't caching the DNS as long.
So what are the takeaways from this to kind of wrap up the show? Put a nice little bow on it, be done, because I'm kind of hungry.
I'm also hungry.
Other than the fact that the Internet of Things is the Internet of shit right now, and you really just should not use any of those devices
or if
unless you are an expert. And
or
you
if
know
like
what you're
your only
doing.
choice is to get a device that has these features, disable and do not use them, and do not connect your device with Wi-Fi or Ethernet to the internet.
Yup.
Just use it without connecting it, and if that's not possible, find a different device that will work.
I think you can't.
Being
I think
connected.
the consumer side of it just can't be dealt with. So I feel like the government actually should have the capacity to force those nodes offline. Like if your house is issuing a DDoS, fuck you.
That's a good thing. Also, I think the government should be able to force companies that make devices to either A, issue software updates, or B, force them to release their code to the public so that somebody can fix them. And, like, if you're not going to update the software and your internet connected, like they regulate, the FCC is like, hey, you can't interfere or must accept all interference. The same kind of regulation, right? You must update to be secure. If a vulnerability is found that is affecting the whole internet, you're interfering. Your device is illegally interfering, right?
Yep.
Or B, you must at least open source it so that somebody else can,
But I am okay. I am totally okay with Counter-Strike's disabling these devices remotely. And if consumers complain, well, they can take it up with the company they bought their garbage from.
Yeah. And if that company doesn't exist anymore, yeah.
And in terms of the impact of the internet,
It's so cyberpunk.
yeah.
Right? Oh man, the garage door openers, they're hacking.
Dude, I used to hack garage door openers when I was in middle school.
They're
You know
hacking.
why?
My restaurant is down. I can't pay. I lost all my money.
I went around because garage door openers usually, like at least when I was a kid, there'd be like 2 or 3, or maybe if you were fancy.
Oh, the thermostat stole my money from my bank account. But
I
it's
will
real.
raise-
It's not
I
a
will
joke. That
raise-
really happens.
I will raise the temperature of your apartment by 1 degree Fahrenheit every hour until you give me a Bitcoin.
Listen, that's a real world thing that could
Dude,
happen
there's a proof
right
of
now.
concept. Someone wrote that malware. It exists.
Yeah, this isn't something out of it is something out of a novel, but also for reals. Absolutely for reals. Earth, not some fantasy world of Snow Crash, but also some fantasy world of Snow.
But luckily, the impact to the U.S. internet was negligible. Everything was back up pretty quick.
Well, I mean, when something that big goes down, the top men are on the job.
Top men.
Top men.
I have been on the other side of those sort of situations in the past, like when I used to work at IBM.
But you're not
or-
top.
No, but I was
You're like
involved.
you're at best mid.
I have been in like
Mid-men?
response teams to stuff like this, and usually the answer is you just kind of sit there and monitor it, and either sort of manually start to figure out ways to identify the bad traffic and block it, or you say fuck it, pull the cord, and wait for real top men to deal with it.
That's always my solution to everything is like, hey, I'm paying people at like the real places like
Yup.
Amazon or whatever. They'll fix it and they'll let me know.
Yup.
I don't gotta do shit. I got nothing to do with it.
All right, I think we're done. All right, let me do the Patreon thing really quick. Save the file. Actually, my internet's kind of slow right now. All right, let's see. Patron manager. No, all right. Patrons away. Come on, load, load, load. And the Patreon patrons for this episode of Geek Nights, in order the amount of money they give us on a continuing basis are Ellen Joyce, Rebecca Dunn, Nicholas Brando, Heidi McNichol, Amanda Duchette, Christian Kuntz, Construction Noises, Ivy Faye, MyStadia.com, William Eisenrose, Jeremy Miner, Chris Reimer, and Thomas Hahn. Chris Hahn and Thomas Reimer. You fucker. Sherman Von Horrell, Iggy Kid, Rare Lavelle, James David White, Rochelle Montanona, Superboy, Irish Wristwatch, Aaron Cerise, Brian Fisher, Sailor Vister, Joy Fried Pork, Matthew Smith, Don Schleich, Jar Thompson, Joshua Joestar, Tyler Eller, Sean Yeager, Sam Cordry, Clinton Walton, Ren from New Zealand, Ryan Perrin, Booze, Scared Yolander, Brian Cedrone, Finn Eric Silverod, The Rural Juror, Chris Midkiff, Chris Knox, Daniel Redmond, Sean Klein, Chris Reimer, and Thomas Hahn. I can't believe it's the 11th anniversary of Geek Nights. We've been doing this for a fucking long time. We have like 1,100 episodes up. We've done 40 panels at PAXs. And yeah. So what I leave you with is I'm actually going to read for you right now the slightly unnerving story of Fishy from FARC. All right, where's Fishy? Fishy. Let's see. I need Fishy. Wrong thread. Okay. Can I bring the web browser back? Web browser doesn't want to come back. Okay, whatever. Fishy. It is real hard to say that list of names real quick, guys. Like, I cannot express to you. Sort of fishy, 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 fishy. Okay, here's the story of Fishy. This story was originally posted on Fark by the user Quexy, Qwexy. Psychosis or ghost story? I don't know. When I was little, probably about 4 or 5 years old, I had an imaginary friend, I think. It was yellow and about 4 feet tall, taller than me at the time, bipedal, and had oversized eyes that always looked straight ahead otherwise, relatively human and naked. I called the thing Fishy. The weirdest thing, though, it was that it scared the hell out of me. I didn't want anything to do with it, and I couldn't imagine as a child that it was coming from inside my head. It walked, or more like skated along, on the walls in the rooms of our house, and apparently could not leave those surfaces. I knew that if I played outside, it could only follow me to the limits of the garage. It always followed me, too, even though I often told it not to. I had difficulty concentrating on drawing things or reading because Fishy was always standing somewhere on the wall, looking over my shoulder. It did not ever sit down, it didn't ever have facial expressions, and it never made any noise. The only times I ever interacted with Fishy were when I was sick in the middle of the night or when I woke up panicked from nightmares. Those times, if I looked at it intently, Fishy would methodically start drifting along the wall toward my parents' bedroom, around the corner, out the door, and down the hall. As soon as it was out of sight, I'd start calling for my mom, as in, Mom, I'm gonna barf. And she'd show up quickly, God bless you, Mom, to help me through it. Fishy would come back, though, as soon as I'd recovered. Then it would stare at me for the rest of the night, 2 days or longer, staring then in the direction of my parents' room. It finally vanished when my sister was born in 1992. I was almost 8 years old by then, and I'd been ignoring Fishy for about a year, but not so much that I didn't notice he'd learned to fly off the wall and visit the floor from time to time. There was one instance in the last 2 months of fishiness when I saw it at someone else's house. A new home that friends of mine, 2 sisters, were moving into. Their father walked into the room, and we were there playing with the moving boxes he'd given us, one another, blah, blah, blah. And in the darkened laundry room behind him, filling the entire doorway at many times its normal size, was Fishy, staring down at the father's back. It wasn't scary so much as irritating. We moved away from there less than a year later. Happy Halloween.